But I mean, I guess it's because I don't really want to move on to the next one, but I suppose we should.
Yeah.
So, Craig, the Blood of Heroes or Salute to the Jugger, whichever territory you're in.
What to say of the Blood of Heroes, a.k.a. the Salute of the Jugger, a Rutger Hauer movie from 1989? Well, we could start by saying it's a Rutger Hauer movie from 1989 and leave it at that. And I think we all know what to do with that information one way or another. If I were feeling a little more charitable, and to be clear, I don't, but I like you, listener, and I want to see you do well in life, I would proffer this much. The Blood of Heroes is a movie set in some dystopian, apocalyptic future where teams of roving folk known as Juggers roam the desolate, sandy landscape of wherever, inexplicably plying their trade at a sport which involves punching each other a lot and spiking a dog's skull onto a stick. Why a dog's skull, Craig? Who knows, listener? Who knows? Certainly not writer-director David Webb Peoples, because baked into his screenplay comes a kind of ambiguity that affords a writer who's clearly forgotten the why of it all the opportunity of not having to explain it. Hauer is Salo, the de facto captain of the Jugger squad upon whom the movie's plot centres. The team is rounded out by Delroy Lindo, Anna Katerina, Vincent D'Onofrio, Justin Monjo, and the spectacularly beautifully named Gandhi McIntyre, the names of whose characters I care not to remember. There is some vague mention that Salo was once a professional jugger who played in a league but was outcast, and to this end, he wants to take his team back to the underground city where much of humanity now resides in order to take on the pros and reclaim his status. This is to be our hero's journey, though I'm not sure I'd declare Salo to be much of a hero, and it's about all the explanation you're going to get as to the where, when, what, why, and how of this absolute shambles. The other future sport we spoke about today had at least something to say about capitalist society, which sets it apart from a lot of other sporting movies which typically fall into the categories of biography and or redemptive arc. The way in which The Blood of Heroes cunningly sets itself apart is in its resolute refusal to yield any kind of salient commentary or observation on anyone, anything, any time, any place, or any circumstance, and is instead a rudderless flotilla of flotsam in search of a plot to justify its existence. One of the central notions of the movie, that the sport played by juggers, are we to assume that this sport is called jug? Again, we don't know, is somehow significant enough to be a means of establishing some social standing. Somewhat falls apart upon observation of said sport, which is clearly the product of a fever dream and not at all a practical demonstration of a team activity. Having established a series of designated positions and assigned each a tool or weapon, the onset of the game is marked by an immediate and complete shambles in which everyone basically runs at each other and starts punching, while the quick, whose job it is to be quick, runs for the pointy stick onto which the dog's skull must be thrust. The sum total of any tactics involved seems to fall upon the person whose role it is to wield a big net made out of chain link, swinging it wildly above their head in an occasional attempt to somehow shield the quick. For a movie which pins its hopes on selling you an authentic future sport, David Webb Peoples sure hasn't spent a lot of time thinking it through, and the result wouldn't look out of place at lunch break or a primary school playground. Minus the chain link, mind. And the dog skull. Probably. Maybe? Anyhow, Salo's squad eventually takes on Kidda, a disappointingly non-scouse Joan Chen, as their new quick, when their existing one, the affectionately monikered Dog Boy, ends up with a gammy leg. Making their way to the underground city in a lift that takes so long to descend that they all catch asleep on the way down, the movie does at least attempt some world building, and I grudgingly accept that I liked a couple of the ideas offered therein. I also quite liked Mad Max cast-off Max Fairchild as Gonzo, an old league acquaintance of Salo's, and the only character whose general demeanour of soullessness and melancholia manages to come across as vaguely interesting, as opposed to poorly written or fleshed out. If I remember correctly, the film climaxes in Kidda being offered a role within the league, but I can't be certain, as a week has passed since I watched it, and even the most mundane of tasks in my day job have quite easily supplanted it within my memory. The problem with this outcome, as it's presented, is that I found no real reason to care about Kidda, meaning her ascension to the league fosters little within me beyond complete ambivalence. I also think we're expected to see it as some sort of redemption by proxy for Salo, but again, I have no reason to feel invested in his emotional well-being, so I genuinely couldn't care less. The Blood of Heroes is little other than a Mad Max wannabe, so desperate to fill that franchise's boots that it even borrows the Australian outback as a location and some of the cast. I'm really glad that Peoples directed nothing else after this and chose to hone his talents as a writer instead, because we got a couple of decent movies out of his word processor in the decades since. We probably also ought to be glad that Lindo and D'Onofrio's careers had enough momentum to push through, but I wouldn't blame them if they left this mess off their CVs. $6 million on this remarkable.
Yes, ambivalence is a good word, Craig, because that and boredom were my two main emotions through this. I didn't care about anybody because I don't think even while watching it, I could always remember what Rutger Hauer's character's name was.
Well, you would need a reason to care, Drew, and no one provides that.
Yes, and Joan Chen's character, I forgot almost immediately that her name wasn't quick till I got to the end of the way. That's a position, isn't it, I think? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird. And in contrast, like I mentioned earlier to these other films, this is a film that's invented a sport where they decided to make that the entire point of the film. Like, oh dear. Not only does that never work, it never works in a sport that people understand and are familiar with, not a sport where there appear to be no rules. Everybody's just fighting each other, and the two people who might be able to score sort of on their own anyway, for the most part. And it doesn't help itself by having a build-up in the opening moments of the film where everybody's getting ready for this game with its very, very arcane timing method. Stones.
I actually really appreciated that. I lasted 26 stones.
It's a characteristic detail. Like, I think that's probably the one thing that's actually memorable about this. But in the build-up to this match, you see all these people, like, they're strapping up and putting on headgear that is, I guess, meant to have a sort of a Mad Max-style post-apocalyptic look, but seems mostly designed to obscure the wearer's vision as much as is possible. Mm-hmm. And that's its sole purpose. And I don't have an awful lot to say about it because I just couldn't care. There aren't any characters. And then we have this strange idea that it's played with dog skulls, and I'm guessing it's taking a terrible toll on the dog population because you don't see a single actual dog in the film that I can recall. Probably all dogs are sacrificed to this game. And then it fails to world build at all. When any attempts make no sense. Well, they do end up on the coast at one point, but for the most part they seem to be in the middle of a barren desert. And in the middle of a barren desert, they find a town that's selling dried fish.
Well, the fish would be dry if they're living in the desert.
And then strange things, I don't know whether they think it's quirky or interesting, but it's like, apparently in this post-apocalypse, plates haven't survived. And all plates have been replaced by large leaves. Again, despite being in the middle of the desert and no greenery being seen at any point ever.
See, I think the mistake you're making, Drew, is misunderstanding the function of nuclear weapons, which is not to turn everything into a barren wasteland. It's just that they dump a lot of sand on everything. So there's nothing to say that the trees won't survive. Just thought I'd throw that fact out there for you.
Fact.
Thanks, Dr. Science.
Yeah, so you got that. They're building up to this attempt to rejoin the league, but you've never established why. Oh God, I've already forgotten his name. You just mentioned it 5 minutes. Salo?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whatever it is he actually did to leave, what the league is, what the league does, why anybody would care. And then we have it's meant to be kind of like the sinister bigwig, the kind of feudalistic like lord or something there, who walks up to your Mad Max fella and wants him to hurt Salo. Again, we don't know why. He's apparently just done a naughty at some point in the past. And then he's all affronted and he says, "You want me to damage him? On purpose? That is the entirety of your sport. It is 100%. Why are you bothered now?" And it goes nowhere anyway. Because in the end, they win their match and then it ends. And I guess that it's okay for him to come back now. And it might be okay if there are any interesting characters. There are none. And the acting is something that happens in other films. Particularly Joan Chen. I've never been afraid before. Really? Perhaps she might care to demonstrate this through, I don't know, acting, perchance. Instead of just saying, "I'm scared," in the same flat monotone you've employed throughout the rest of the film. It's just more than anything, it's boring.
It's worth remembering that David Webb Peoples wrote Unforgiven, but he also wrote this film, which early on, one of the first lines that anyone says is, "I'm going to rip your tits off, bitch."
That was Unforgiven, right?
Yeah, but then, apart from that being just a horrible line too, her retort is, "Oh no, I'm going to hurt you." And
I know.
Her acting's appalling, but the lines she's given us are also
Snappy
terrible.
comeback.
No, it is you who is the one who will be hurt.
Yes.
It is you who you will have your tits ripped off.
I know you are, but what am I? Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can blame the internet for, but I think the primary thing we need to blame it in this instance is that it made it sound in some way interesting. And it
or
very
that,
much
or that
isn't.
it allowed us to downsteal this film.
Yes. Yeah. It on a kind of the capsule recaps that I read made it sound a bit more gonzo and a bit more Mad Max like, and having a bit more of an interesting kind of world building thing going on, and it very much doesn't. I don't really have a great deal more to add over what we've already discussed. It is just quite dull. I didn't hate it. It's just not interesting enough to have much of an opinion about it.
Yeah.
It was a thing that I saw, and if anything, thinking about it now to record this, it's frustrating because it feels like there could have been a much, much better film in here. Like the ingredients are there, but they've just been woefully underbaked. And I mean, I believe this script was written around about the same time as Unforgiven. Unforgiven went into a kind of a very long polishing period by the sounds of it. And I guess if it was the same quality as this when it was made, it probably needed it. As I say, there's ideas here that could have worked, and some of it that could have made for a certainly much more interesting film. But yeah, none of it's actually been done. So c'est la vie. The characters are dull. The action doesn't really hold up. The world building just isn't there. It's frustratingly almost there in some places, particularly towards the end, but doesn't quite get there. And it just can't conjure up enough drama or conflict anywhere in it to really care about it one way or the other. So yeah, bit of a downer.
The whole thing's clearly been predicated on this one notion of, imagine this brutal future sport in this apocalyptic landscape, and this is what people travel about doing, and this is the only way that they can, earn some sort of societal respect or whatever. But that so little thought has been put into that sport, the whole central tenet. I feel like it would not have taken a lot more work to polish up and actually make the sport something that just made any sense whatsoever. I was going to say more sense, but just any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand in that world why that might work, saying because everything's sort of gone back to almost like a tribalistic society with like remnants of some technology and things, in the way that it's what some sports have come out of. It's like having a warrior for a tribe or a locality. That's where you earn respect or something, or simply in this horrible, miserable, crappy world where like some sort of sport appears that gives people any sort of outlet at all. That I understand that as a basis for it, and that you say like maybe a local hero is people's existence can't be particularly fantastic in this, so sport's an outlet, it's an entertainment because there's not a lot else. That's all there, that you can all understand that, but like, this is the sport they came up with, and what does anybody do? I don't know. Why are they doing it?
Sport unifies people, and it promotes individual and team achievement and excellence. None of which are present in this movie. What's so galling about it is that on a routine basis at primary school, we came up with impromptu games to play in the playground that made more sense and were more cohesive as sports than this. Yep. We had a game called Pile On, right? Where we would take a tennis ball or tenny ball, for those of you north of the border, and you would throw it against one person who had the ball would throw it against the wall, pitch it against the wall hard enough that it would cross over the playground where we were all gathered and onto the sort of grass playing field behind. And then whoever felt brave enough, you had to run over and grab the ball, at which point everybody else screamed "pile on" and started chasing that person, who then had to make it to the touchline, which was the other side of the field, before everybody before everybody amassed on top of them and caused horrific injuries. And that was a more functional sport than David Webb Peoples has come up with for this film, which pivots entirely upon this sport.
Yeah, my primary school had a very similar game. I just dispensed with the tennis ball and was called Pileones.
Cool.
Subtly different, legally distinct there, Craig. And also, it was more coherent and enjoyable than the sport in this film.
Just bizarre. Just bizarre.
Yeah.
This is a film that was kind of at the periphery of. It was always sort of. I was aware of it when I was younger. Like you say, Scott, I feel like it had a reputation. I didn't know it as Blood of Heroes because outside the US it was Salute of the Jugger, and I had heard of it, and it was the kind of film that I might have rented on a whim. You know, knowing it was some sort of schlocky B movie. I had heard enough people talk about it. I would hear it referenced in places. I would read reviews of it in like my old copy of the Time Out film guide from 1996 or whatever the edition I had was. And in fact, it would have been earlier than that. So there was a real danger that I might have stumbled across this when I was earlier. But you compare it to something else that you would have on that list, like The Running Man or something, for example. And there's a sort of film made on an absolute budget, centering around some sort of bizarre future sport in an apocalyptic, broken down dystopian future. And that's a fantastically entertaining film. And it's not that it has a complex rule set or anything that has to be abided by. It's just a really enjoyable time. I would have been so disappointed if I had actually bothered to rent this back in the day. So I'm glad I was able to steal it for free.
Yeah. It's strange you mentioned The Running Man, Craig, because that was actually very much in my head while watching this. I'm actually watching Rollerball as well. What you have there, apart from like you sort of get around the morality part of it by these people being forced against their will to take part, so that evades that particular issue of you're killing people because you actually have to. But you have charismatic actors in that, which helps a lot. But also, you have any character at all. You understand who these people are. You see, here are some individuals, and I can recognise them, tell you which one they are and what they're doing and what their motivations are. Whereas in this, there's some people with some masks on, and once they've got their outfit on until the end, when the other team, I don't even say the bad team, because they're pretty bad, have sort of deep red scarves or headbands or something, and like, well, I can finally tell which one's which, but I still don't care.
Yeah. Also, at the end, the team that they're playing against, the people who are in the league, I can't remember, is there any actual evidence there to suggest that they're living any better life as a result of being juggers within the league than anyone else?
Oh, you see, like the big guy. Gonzo, yeah. You see him going to the meeting with the guy that he's forced to call my lord.
They have a bit of a banquet or something, don't they?
Yeah, a banquet of cockroaches and flies, I think. And where they don't have plates either, but do have seashells instead of plates, which I guess at least last longer than leaves. But I don't get the idea that they are. Yeah, no. It's a short answer to your question. No, I don't think that they're doing any better. Not that like any of you only see one of them. The other people effectively don't exist.
Just bizarre. $6 million. Jesus wept.
This one, like you're talking about David Webb Peoples, so I think the notable thing about the other films, well-regarded films that he wrote the script for, is that he didn't direct it. And I wonder how much that plays into it. I suspect quite a lot.
Yeah.